Hello and a very warm welcome to this special telecast on Rajya Sabha television. I'm your host Frank Rausen Pereira. After a successful launch of the book, The Emergency, Indian Democracy's Darkest Hour, it is now being released in Hindi, Kannada, Telugu and the Gujarati editions. And joining me for a chat today is the author of that book and Chairman Prasar Bharati, Mr. A. Surya Prakash. Mr. Prakash, welcome and thank you for joining me on Rajya Sabha television.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Let's first try and put into perspective and understand what made you write this book in the first place.
A lot of things. One, a vibrant democracy became a dictatorship for 19-21 months. And that's the most terrible thing that can happen to any democracy. I was with the Indian Express in the 1970s in Bangalore, and we had that effect of the emergency in terms of censorship, pre-censorship. My own personal experiences, which were quite terrible in the sense that we had an Inspector General Police was appointed as the chief censor in Karnataka, and he thereby virtually became my chief editor. Can you imagine a man in uniform correcting the copies that we write? And so we would go during the day and, on our reporting assignments, come back, editorials, our reports, everything would go to the Inspector General Police office.
Was that the case everywhere, sir?
No, in every state they had a chief censor. They had different kinds of people. This was the biggest, this was a way of humiliating the free press, of humiliating Indian Express. So we were subjected to pre-censorship, and the Inspector General of Police became the chief censor. He had a battery of police inspectors and some information department guys. Can you imagine police inspectors sitting and deciding what will go into print? Today's generation has no idea what the emergency is. If you ask me to point out one single thing that would, sort of symbolize the worst form of dictatorship that we went through, it is an IGP of police becoming my editor. So, if you say what made you write this book, this book was in the making for many decades. I had read the Shah Commission report, I had read other reports, I had partly written this book. Anyway, finally it was all put together last year, a year ago.
So the book is titled The Emergency, Indian Democracy's Darkest Hour.
Yeah.
Why do you call it the darkest hour?
What else would it be? We became an independent nation in 1947. In 1950, we got our constitution, which gave us all our fundamental rights and everything else. And here was a government, soon after the declaration of emergency, the president issued a proclamation suspending fundamental rights of citizens. And do you know, we did not have the right to personal liberty, right to life. We did not have any of the fundamental rights. If you don't have right to life, what would you call it? Actually, it is the darkest hour.
You belong to a generation that saw those days through, that went through all that you had to go through. I belong to a generation that has not seen that period. If you had to compare something and say that something that could be comparable to that period now, what would it be? Can any comparison be made?
There can be no comparison whatsoever between, what is the comparison? We were into a form of dictatorship for 21 months when Indira Gandhi imposed the emergency. She jailed all her political opponents. She put pre-censorship and etc. on newspapers. We could not write what was happening. Thousands and lakhs of citizens were packed off in police vans to sterilization camps. Unheard of. If you have seen Schindler's List or any of those Nazi era movies, it's exactly like that. There is a village called Utawar in Haryana. One day the police came, surrounded the village, pulled out all the male residents from age 8 to 80. All males were pulled out, bundled into police vans. They were taken to Nuh. There's a place called Nuh, where there is a primary health center. They had put up a camp there. All of them were vasectomized and then put in police vans and dumped back in the village. What do you call this? And those who perpetrated this, the bigger problem I'll tell you, those who perpetrated this, those who brought a vibrant democracy, turned it into a dictatorship. Till today there is no regret, there is no apology. And this is the biggest problem. That is why I say we should never forget the emergency. Because those who perpetrated it, they have never said sorry for it. So they could very well be ready to do it all over again. That is why your generation and succeeding generations, every generation must know the story of the emergency. Do you know that policemen surrounded villages? Do you know that all school teachers and policemen had a quota to get at least 20 cases for sterilization? And if the teacher did not get the cases, he or she did not get his salary that month. Do you know that school teachers themselves had to be vasectomized and show the certificates? Do you know that district magistrates put school teachers in jail under MISA because they refused to get vasectomized? Are you aware of these things? Is your generation aware of these things? Should you not be aware of these things? Do you think our democracy is safe if you are not aware of these things? And I repeat again, those who perpetrated these atrocities, till today there is not a word of apology. I am very angry about this. I have experienced it myself and I will never forget it, and every June 25 I make it a point to remember it in some form or the other. I write my articles, I have public speaking engagements, whatever it is. Right now I am sitting before you in Rajya Sabha television.
And we can all be aware of it through your book. It's coming out in various languages as well, 4 different languages.
The purpose of bringing it in all our languages is, you know, it is a book. I have tried to make it as simple as possible. I want people in this country across linguistic areas to read and understand what happened at that time. In fact, I am of the view that at the high school level, we have to have a chapter on the emergency. We should not be ashamed of it. But every generation must know what happened at that time so that they will always be on the guard.
There's a lot to learn from it.
There's a lot to learn from it. You must protect your democratic tradition. You must protect those core values in our constitution. You meaning successive generations.
Yes.
So I believe actually this must be taught in schools. Look at Germany. There are dozens of Holocaust museums across the world. There is a big one in Washington. There are dozens in Germany. In Germany, in the curriculum, it is incumbent on every school to tell the children what happened during the Holocaust and how millions of Jews were sent to the gas chambers.
It is part of history at the end of the day.
It's part of history. They teach them that so that Germany will never experience that ever again.
That having been said, Mr. Prakash, which sections of society or who do you think was worst impacted as a result of the emergency?
I think every citizen was impacted. Like I said, if you are standing at a bus stop, a police van comes there, hauls up all the guys waiting for a bus and takes them to a sterilization camp, are you not impacted? So on and so forth. There are a variety of ways in which all this happened. Local, you see, members of that Congress party, once it turned into a dictatorship, every little small leader, you know, every minion became a monster in the village, in the taluk and so on. If you don't listen to him, he will put you behind bars. Like say, he wants you to rent your house to him. God knows, he probably wants you to give your daughter in marriage to his son. You refuse. And this political leader will tell the district magistrate, this fellow is a troublemaker, he is anti-government, he is anti-Indira Gandhi, and then pack you up, put you behind bars under Maintenance of Internal Security Act, that was the dreaded law, or the Defence of India rules. It happened in very many ways. Businessmen, local businessmen were all harassed.
You know, talking about the law,
Yeah.
several amendments were made in Parliament
Correct.
during this particular period. If you could take us through that.
Starting from the 38th to the 42nd Amendment, you know, the First Amendment was that the Supreme Court will not, there will be no judicial review in regard to election petitions, that this will not be heard by a higher judiciary. They decide to make a law that it will go to the president and this, that and the other. That was to protect Indira Gandhi because she had been held guilty of electoral corrupt practice. Next, there came a law, that is the 39th Amendment, where various, our election law was amended, all kinds of things were done just to protect her. In fact, the Constitution was amended just to protect her. All this was done in a jiffy. One day it was introduced in the Lok Sabha 39th Amendment, passed in 2 hours. Next day it was introduced in Rajya Sabha. Totally illegal. You have to give a gap of few days, give notice to members, nothing. Introduced in Rajya Sabha, passed in a few hours. That was a Friday. Then it goes to assemblies because there are some constitutional amendments which, if they affect the states, have to be passed by at least 1/2 of the state assemblies. So on Saturday it goes to the assemblies. All assemblies meet on Saturday and pass it. On Sunday morning, the president is up and ready to sign and make it a law, because on Monday morning the Indira Gandhi's petition was coming before Supreme Court. And then the government lawyers go and say, my lord, the Constitution amendment, you can't hear this case.
Talking about the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
talking about the judiciary, what was the role of the judiciary back then, pillar of democracy? What happened?
It's most unfortunate that while many high courts admitted these habeas corpus petitions and tried to, give some relief to political prisoners, all these cases were aggregated in the Supreme Court. It's known as the habeas corpus case, ADM Jabalpur versus Shivkant Shukla. Okay. Now, in this case, the central question was, the government argued, the Attorney General argued, that during the emergency, after the President has issued a proclamation, citizens' right to life and personal liberty stands suspended. You cannot assert that right. So the Supreme Court had to decide whether I had that right or not. It was a 5-judge bench. Chief Justice Ain Ray, Justice Khanna, Beg, Chandrachud and Bhagwati. They were hearing the case. Attorney General was arguing that citizens do not have the right to life and personal liberty. Justice Khanna asked him, so Mr. Attorney General, if a policeman out of personal enmity were to shoot dead a citizen, that citizen and that family has no, he has no right, that citizen has no scope to move a court of law for relief. So the Attorney General's reply, which Justice Khanna has quoted in his autobiography, was, it may shock your conscience, my lord, it shocks mine, but there is no relief. Okay? So you have no right to life and personal liberty. Those who inflicted this on us during 1975-77, I repeat this, till today there is not even an apology. So never forget the emergency. These are people, who knows what they will do tomorrow to us.
But after what we've gone through, after what the nation has gone through, will an apology suffice, Mr. Prakash?
An apology will never suffice. I want every tyrant of the emergency to be identified, prosecuted, punished. Nothing short of that. It may take 50 years, 100 years. Are you not hearing all these Nazi crimes around the world? They are being hunted. And whenever they are caught, they may be 80, 90 years old, 95 years old. They are hauled up and brought to book. You have to do that in respect of the emergency. I will give you some examples. In Tihar jail, they were short of space. Suddenly on 25th, 26th June, hundreds of political prisoners were brought in. So this jail superintendent said, sir, he went to the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi and said, there is no space. Naveen Chawla was secretary to the Lieutenant Governor. The Tihar jail superintendent has given evidence before Shah Commission. He said, Naveen Chawla said, build cells with asbestos roofs. In Delhi in June, when you have 44 degrees temperature, Navin Chawla wanted these politicians who were arrested to be put in cells made of asbestos. The jail superintendent said, "Sir, how will anybody survive in that?" He said, "Bake them. Put them in these asbestos cells and bake them." This is the evidence of the jail superintendent before the Shah Commission. Another thing Navin Chawla said, according to the jail superintendent, he said, "If there is further overflow, throw them into the lunatic cell." Now, what did you do with this person? This very party, in later years, made him the election commissioner and chief election commissioner of India. A man who does not have basic qualification to hold any public office, and I will tell you what the Shah Commission said about him, who is not even a Democrat. Should he not be a Democrat? This is a simple qualification you should expect from anyone who holds the office of election commissioner in this country. So all of them need to be punished. There are a lot of police officers. Look at the police officers who murdered Rajan in Kerala. All of them got away. Look at the police officers who traumatized and brutalized Lawrence Fernandez, brother of George Fernandez. They all got away. Look at the police officers who surrounded villages, district magistrates who threw people into jail because they wouldn't get sterilized. They all got away. And you want us to forget the emergency, isn't it? So, this is, for example, as I explained to you, the habeas corpus case, that is what happened as far as judiciary was concerned. Even more tragic, Justice Khanna was the only one who wrote a dissenting judgment. All the other 4 judges went along with the government. And they deprived us of our life, fundamental right to life and personal liberty. Okay? Among them was Justice Beg. In his judgment, he wrote, Indira Gandhi, he didn't name Indira Gandhi, but he said, she's taking, it's like maternal, with maternal instinct, she's taking care of you in the jails, you are well fed and well looked after. What is your grouse? Did you punish him or did you do anything to that judge? You promoted him and made him the Chief Justice. We should not forget these things. This is unforgivable. Can you imagine a Supreme Court judge telling political prisoners in that time during dictatorship, you are well fed and well taken care of. Why are you coming to court? Why are you complaining? Maternal instinct, something he says in his judgment. It's terrible.
Let's talk about the Fourth Estate. What was the role of the media back then, between 75 and 77?
There were a lot of people in the media who stood up to Indira Gandhi. The Indian Express and several other newspapers initially kept a blank editorial space as a mark of protest. Then other forms of protest continued. But the Indira Gandhi government came down very heavily on media. First thing she did, there is what is called, we know it, popularly it's known as the Firoz Gandhi Act. This is Parliament Protection of Publication Act. It protects us, media, from defamation libel suits when we report Parliament. Earlier, minus that protection, Firoz Gandhi realized in 1950s, minus that protection, we were liable to defamation cases. So he brought in that law. The first thing Indira Gandhi did was to repeal that law, so that we will become extremely vulnerable to these cases when we report Parliament. That was to prevent us from reporting any opposition voices that may be heard during emergency. Then there was an Objectionable Matters Act something, where district magistrate had the power to just walk into your press, seize your press, stop publication on suspicion. He'll say, I think you are going to publish something terrible tomorrow. So I am going to stop you. Stop the press. He will seize the press. So press council was abolished. Lot of journalists were arrested. Something like 253 journalists I think were arrested. Many under Misa and so on. Kuldeep Nair, K.R. Sundararajan, a host of journalists were arrested. Okay, put in jail. That was the worst period for media, but there were many in media who stood up to that.
One among them would definitely be Ramnath Goenka.
The tallest among them was Ramnath Goenka. He staked everything. His business was newspaper business. He staked everything. Actually, it was at a stage where if she had not, called elections in January 77, there was every possibility of government takeover of Indian Express. Or Indian Express would have closed down. A great institution which has stood for democracy and freedom and our constitutional rights. And he was at the vanguard of that moment. Extraordinary person who had so much at stake, all his businesses. He put everything at stake for the sake of democracy. Similarly, Justice Khanna as a judge. So there were a lot of people like that.
Sure. You kept talking about the Shah Commission.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Shah Commission now and its view on extra constitutional authority.
I will just read out a para from the Shah Commission. The Shah Commission went into a lot of cases. Lawrence Fernandez case, all the Delhi emergency cases relating to a host of atrocities and so on and so forth, the family planning camp cases and all that. And then it also looked at some persons who became extra constitutional authorities. Among them were P.S. Bindar, K.S. Bajwa, Naveen Chawla. Okay? About them it said, their only anxiety was to preserve and protect their proximity to the seat of power, and toward that end, they did everything which they thought would lead to their own advancement. They grossly misused their position and abused their powers in cynical disregard of the welfare of citizens, and in the process rendered themselves unfit to hold any public office which demands an attitude of fair play and consideration for others. In their relish for power, they completely subverted the normal channels of command and administrative procedures. Finally, it said, effective dissent was smothered, followed by a general erosion of democratic values. High-handed and arbitrary actions were carried out with impunity. Tyrants sprouted at all levels overnight. Tyrants whose claim to authority was largely based on their proximity to power. After such an indictment, many of them were promoted and given all kinds of other assignments. This is one of the great tragedies, according to me. This has to be corrected. All those who misused their office and all those who committed these atrocities during the emergency, in my view, even today, we must prosecute them. They have to be punished. Otherwise, democracy is not safe.
Mr. Prakash, what is the immediate consequence of the period after emergency, after 77, and is it still relevant today?
I'll tell you what, in 1977, the Congress party lost power. In the whole of northern central India, after over 300 Lok Sabha seats, they could win just 2. And the people completely, roundly rejected the Congress party for what had happened during emergency. Then the Janata Party came to power. Then we got the 44th Amendment, which undid much of this. For example, we didn't speak of the 42nd Amendment. I must tell you 2 things in the 42nd Amendment, which are really frightening. In the 42nd Amendment, the Prime Minister decided to give the President the power. The President was virtually, seen to be a rubber stamp President. The President was given the power to amend the Constitution through an executive order for 2 years. Can you imagine anything as atrocious as this? There is no democratic constitution which can have something like this. Secondly, they abolished the need for quorum in legislatures. This is the 42nd Amendment. So the 44th Amendment had to correct all this. Restore our constitution, the core values of our constitution, and restore our democratic way of life. And that is how it has been after that. We are a very vibrant democracy. In the last 5-7 years, you would have seen the growth of social media, the growth of media itself. Literacy levels have shot up to about 75% or so in most of the states. Economic power has improved among people. They can afford to buy newspapers. They can afford to have a cable connection. approximately 180 million homes have television today out of 250 million homes. Most of them have cable connection. The circulation of newspapers, the graph is going northwards over the last 20 years. So there is a great media boom in the country, and there's constant information flow. And with that, you have got the social media now, quite cacophonous in that sense, noisy, and sometimes not in good taste at all. A lot of comments and things that happen on social media. But anyway, at the end of the day, that is our democracy. That is the vibrancy you see in our democracy.
You know, more recently, ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi has come to power, there have been several instances as far as the opposition is concerned where they have said that under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, there have been several emergency-like situations. What do you have to say about that?
I will say, don't bandy about this word emergency. Don't use it so lightly. I am telling you what happened. A man in uniform was virtually my editor in the Indian Express in Bangalore. That is the emergency. People being caught on the roadside, dumped into police vans and taken to sterilization camps. That is emergency. Okay? Somebody saying throw them in lunatic cell. That is emergency. Please don't compare today's situation to that. Today there may be some aberrations where some individuals violate the law and do certain things, where the state has to firmly deal with them. What has that got to do with the emergency? The emergency was a 100% ruthless dictatorship. How can anybody compare today's situation to that? And please don't belittle those who have fought for restoration of freedom and democracy in this country by trying to compare that with some aberrations that you may say here and there in today's India. There are no parallel at all.
And finally, before I let you go, why should we go out and read this book?
You must read this book to know what happened to your democracy, what happened to your country. You know, this book has I've strung together a series of stories relating to the media, relating to the judiciary, family planning camps, executive. The whole cleanup operation in Turkman Gate, every story, some of them are really frightening. Some of them are very sad. Because we lost our right to life, Article 21, Rajan's father every day would go to the Chief Minister's office, to the Secretariat in Trivandrum. They would say, sir, nobody has any right to personal liberty and life. So you cannot move any court seeking relief that your son is missing. Can you imagine? You cannot move a habeas corpus petition now because that is the decision now. That is the law. So I want people to read this book to understand what happened, and I am sure that will fortify them in many ways to protect our democracy, our democratic traditions, and our constitution. Our constitution is very dear to all of us. That is what binds all of us. We are a very diverse nation, and such a diverse nation can be held together only by a constitution like the one we have, and only by preserving our democratic tradition, a liberal democratic society.
Sure. Mr. Surya Prakash, a pleasure as always to have you on Rajya Sabha television, and thank you for that lesson in history.
Thank you very much for having me on Rajya Sabha TV.
That's it on this telecast. Thank you for watching.